And as long as school is rewarding enough, like that piece of chocolate, then they're going to run here and sit on their rug and wait for your lesson because it's far better than throwing the tantrum in the living room, so to speak, okay? So that's one of the things. Let's go to the last one. We'll talk a little bit about traditional approaches. I want to start off by talking about what this ADA number is that is at your school, average daily attendance. The principal told me your number. Does anybody know what your ADA is?
Oh, you mean like our, yeah, it's 87%.
Did anybody else know that number? Okay, that's something I think everybody should start to become familiar with.
We were aware, and we talked about this the very first of the year, and Diana had a sheet that gave all the AYP results.
There will be a test, just so you know. 87, write that down.
You remember me saying, I'd like to improve that to the 90%.
3 years in a row?
Yeah, 3 years in a row.
Well, let me tell you about what that number means, because we see a number like 90%, and we say, oh, that's high. 90% is high. But I want you to think about this for a minute. If a kid is a 90% attender in a 180-day school year, they will have missed 10% of those days. That's 18 school days. It's close to a month. At 87%, you are at a little over a month, 4.5 weeks. That's the average kid at your school. So which month do you want to have your kids not show up?
Really? The last one.
Dang, that didn't work, Kate. I told you that wasn't going to work. I know you guys work hard, and you hate for any of your lessons to be just dismissed, let alone a whole month of them thrown away. So what percentage, let me ask you this. What is a reasonable number of days for a child to miss? Under best circumstances, what do you think is a reasonable number of days for a kid to miss school? Considering sicknesses, maybe a family emergency, what is a reasonable number? 5. Okay, 5. That's the number I came up with. About 5 days. So your attendance is going to have to be at 98% for you to get the average kid missing 5 days. Now think about it. It's the average kid, because at 87%, you actually have a lot of kids that don't miss very much. That means the other kids are missing 2 months. Okay? So that's the reality of what 90% means when you see that. And so I would suggest a target much higher than 90. I would suggest you guys go for the gold. Try for something higher than that. Okay? So 95% gets you 2 weeks on average that they miss. 97, 98 gets you right there at 1 week. Okay, let's go to the next one. So what is the traditional approach at dealing with attendance problems? Let's write a policy. That'll solve our problems. We'll all lock ourselves in a room and write a policy. How many policies have you written in your time here?
I've written many.
There is a local high school 3-4 years ago that wrote a very controversial policy to handle their attendance. And I don't know if you know the punchline of this, but basically they set up a fine system and did the whole 9 yards. It's a very punishing system, but being people, kids and families figured a way around the system. They started excusing their kids' absences to avoid the fines, and unexcused absences went down, 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 down. Excused absences went way, way, way up, and the number of kids sitting in the seats didn't change at all. So policies, as a general sense, don't do a whole lot. They tend to punish failure to attend, which I've said isn't a very effective thing. They're trying to address some lack of behavior, which is kind of weird. The next thing they do that with lost credits, detention, fines, suspensions, school service. There's all kinds of things you can do to punish kids, and I'll show you, to get them back. But the problem is that the reason that the kid left hasn't been fixed at all. I didn't like my teacher, I don't understand what's going on in class, and all those things that make the kids run away hasn't been solved, right? So they go out of their punishment and come right back into the same punishing condition. Doesn't help them any. It also tends to lower the bar. Have you ever seen policies that just say, well, you can miss 35 days before anything happens to you, you know? So kids miss right to the 35th day and then come back to school. Because that's exactly what they'll do. They'll find the line and go right to it. Okay? And one of my pet peeves of policies is they're all written as one-sided contracts. If you bought a home or bought a car or bought anything with one of these policies guiding the purchase, you'd be screaming. Because what does the policy say? Kid, you're going to come on time, and you're going to come every day, or we're going to punish you. And nowhere in the contract does it say what you're going to do. It doesn't say, well, I promised to start on time myself. I promised to deliver a valuable lesson. I promised to do. They tend to be one-sided contracts. And from the perspective of the kids and their families, that just doesn't seem very fair. Okay? So that's what happens with policies. I want to talk about some of the things now that they do. Track and meet, this is one of my favorite. We did an exercise with a bunch of principals and said, pick your 10 worst attenders and get them to attend. You got 1 month to improve them. And we were invited in by the board and the superintendent. And so I was talking to the various principals, and that's what they did. This is what every single one of them did, because they had 10 kids. So they would identify the 10 kids, and they would meet them and track them and meet with them and track them and meet with them and track them. And I said after the month, and they were able to get the kids to attend, because if you hound them enough, you can, you know, kind of, especially you get to choose the 10. That was the other thing, was they got to choose their 10 low attenders. They scared them right back into the classroom, but now they're thinking to themselves, if I were to try to apply this school-wide, how much personnel would it require to track and meet these guys? And tracking and meeting, did that solve any of their problems? It didn't make the class more fun. It didn't build relationships. It didn't do any of the things really that you should be doing. Tracking and meeting, it works for a few kids. And you will do tracking and meeting because it's what you do, but it's not a universal solution. It's only a bit of the puzzle. Let's go to the next one here. Student of the month. Let us reward the student of the month. I'll give out a ticket once a month to a student. You've got how many students at this school?
220.
And in a week, you've got 1,100 attendances, because there's 5 days of 220, and you're going to give out one reinforcer to the student of the month. It's too lean. In fact, most of the reward programs that we see not only are too lean, but who are you rewarding? The kid who's likely to attend anyway. It's not built for the kid who's not attending. So these kind of reward programs. Now, let me say, I'm a big fan of like praise note systems. If they're done right, they are phenomenal at getting results. But the intensity of that program requires some effort. Now, let me tell you a quick story. We had a school out in Rich County, was the Rich Middle School. And you can imagine, if you think winter's bad here in Cache Valley, just go live in Randolph or Lake Town for a winter and you'll find out what 40 below is. But they had some cabin fever. Kids in the school were going bananas and stuff. And so Kip put in a praise note system. And he had the faculty working, and he realized pretty quickly that faculty were putting a lot of time into putting these praise notes out for, they defined a couple good behaviors they wanted to praise kids for. And they were lucky to get, you know, about 1/3 of the kids a note in a given week, or a penetration of about 33% per week. That's a real typical rate in most praise note systems that use the teachers as the labor force for that. He then had a brilliant idea. Let's have the kids praise each other. So they gave the notes out to the kids and said, use them for each other. Well, there's a lot of fraud in the system immediately, because they're turning these things in rewards. So he had to figure out a way to stop the fraud. And what he did was he said that you could praise a classmate if a teacher signs off on it. Okay, so a teacher had to witness it, and then they would just sign off. And they went to fill it out. And so I was sitting in his office one day, and there was like 5 adult men in this tiny principal's office, and this little 8-year-old girl walks in, and she's got her fist balled up like this. She was not afraid of us at all, because this principal is so good with the kids. And he stops the meeting and turns around and said, "What you got, darling?" That's how they talk in Rich County. And this little girl walks in, and she goes, and there were 10 crumpled up praise notes in her hand. And she had this big grin on her face. She said, "Come here." So he laid them all out and read each one aloud. And he said, "I'm going to send these home to your mom." And so he put them in an envelope, and he handed her a treat, and she went skipping off. He said, "I haven't had a phone call for 2 months." For a principal, no phone calls. Just imagine, no one bugging you for 2 months.
They all want something.
Yeah. So he pretty much killed his cabin fever, and he got it up to 5 notes per kid per week. So just by using the kids. I just want to say that the praise notes work, but most of the Student of the Month programs we see are really lean in terms of reinforcements. So don't get caught doing something really, really shallow and then being frustrated because it didn't work. Well, of course it's not going to work if it's done like that. Bell ringers, we do this for tardies and stuff. We're going to start right on time. Those are good things. They work to a degree because they do some things, but they're not a universal thing. And I think I had one more down there. hall sweeps. This is one of my favorites. You get teams of teachers together with their armbands and their clipboards, and you start them at one end of the school, and they start going through, you know, and they sweep the kids off into the classroom. The one school we saw this, I had the principal describe this program, and it didn't take long before the kids had set up a cell phone system that signaled where the sweepers were so they could get in behind them.
That would be me walking the hall and they just go to the other side.
And to me, it defines coercion. If the kids are doing that behavior to get away from the hall sweepers, you have discovered that you're now coercive. It's just kind of, we see it happening. But that's another one that we see schools do to shoo them in. I'm sure you guys have the crowd in the hallway before school starts, and it's a task to get them to stop their conversation and into the classroom. We just suggested, I expect you in your classroom, let me walk you there. And so you get them there. Because a lot of times schools will want to be friendly and buddy and, you know, not be a pain in the butt about it. I don't want to shoot the kids back in because they might get mad at me. No, you need to just say, here's the expectation. We need you in the classroom. One day I will take you there, but tomorrow I expect you to be there by yourself. So you just make those expectations clear, I think, and you won't have to do the armband thing. Let's go to the last one, some suggestions. So now this is based on everything we've talked about. Obviously, I'm a very database-driven guy. That's the hazard of having a math degree and teaching statistics. I tend to like numbers. But when you examine your data, one thing I see in schools a lot is they'll have lots of data, and they don't know necessarily what it means. What's the fifth stay-nine? I'm not sure I know what the fifth stay-nine is. We always report it back to you in ways that ensure that you're mad at us. That's why I may turn everything into red, yellow, and green so that people wouldn't throw too many darts at my picture. But when you examine the data, make sure you understand it. But I want you to actually do something. Make a list. So when you look across your campus and you see kids not attending, make a list. You should know who these kids are, not just in your head, but on a list. And maybe it's in the principal's office, but you should have a list of bubble kids, kids that we know, hey, these should be pretty quick to fix. I mean, a list of kids that we think, hey, let's just figure out functionally what's going on, let's solve their problem, let's get them back here. So like Rich said, the simple ones, get them taken care of. And then list your chronic ones, the ones that are really going to be difficult, and you're going to have to set out some long-range plans. But I think making a list is going to make it more concrete for you as a group. And then in your professional meetings, you review these kids. How are we doing on this one? How are we doing on this one? And you have data collected on these kids. And you said that every year you get a number of ADA. I'd plot it on a graph and have it on my desk every day. And you guys should be able to go in and see those numbers to see how you're doing. I think ultimately you'd want the kids to see those data as well. I think at first they'd go, let's see how low we could make it go. I think they might react a little bit incorrectly to a public display of the information. But I think once they start to get into it and get some pride, seeing the day's attendance will give them a means to try to get better. We'll talk about more of that in the next few items. Identify the missing elements, plan, and follow up. So once we have a child, we find out where that reward and cost is, where our relationships are. Do we have someone here that this child looks up to, that they trust? Can we connect these two and make sure that, you know, that relationship is solid? And then we make a plan for the kid. Maybe it's a behavioral contract.